the reason that there are so many impediments to third parties is precisely because of the two-party corporate duopoly, which has conspired essentially to prevent any kind of effective electoral challenge. So yes, it's going to be extremely difficult. They're going to throw every impediment they can in terms of third parties, but we're going to have to remain fast. And let me also add, the problem with running as a Democrat is that the working class is fully aware that the greatest betrayal that they have endured has come from the Democratic Party, and in particular, the Clinton administration. So in my book, America, the Farewell Tour, I wrote a chapter out of Anderson, Indiana, which used to be a huge center for GM plants. Well, after NAFTA, GM literally ripped down they moved all the machinery to Monterrey, Mexico, and then ripped down the plants and left giant weed-choked lots surrounded by cyclone fencing. And then, of course, Anderson fell into the kind of tailspin that many former industrial centers have fallen into. And I talked to the old UAW leadership, and they said they were never going to vote for Clinton. They're not unaware of who did this to them.
Welcome to another episode of You Left Shit Out. I'm your host, Compton J. Welcome, everybody. Starting out with a good amount of people. Happy to see everybody here. This is a snippet from Bad Faith Podcast. It's on topic for today's topic, which is a very important topic. I don't think this is just my observation of what I see happening based on sort of analyzing the strategies between the two different camps that we're going to be talking about today. Oops. Turn this off. Hang on a second. Sorry, I got a message. So what we're going to do is start out with a chat check. First, let's see here. Same people or some of the same comrades we always see here. Thank you for always supporting, and a lot of new people actually. So I'm just tossing everybody's welcome up here. Hey fam. Okay. I think I got a good amount. Okay, so I think I'll go there with the chat check, and we're approaching 90 people. So hopefully we can get our likes up. That'll get more people in the chat with us, or more people will be notified of the stream and they will join. So if you want more people in the chat, which I do, like this stream, and that will help. All right, so let's get started. So I am feeling a little bit, I think I have a cold. Yeah, I have a cold. Or sinuses, whichever. Sometimes I can't tell. Anyway, so you might hear my voice might sound a little different, and I might have to sneeze a couple of times. So that's what it is. Hang on a second. I'm doing a Twitter check right now because this topic spun off of Twitter. So there were some clips I was watching. Actually, let me put the graphic here. But actually, let me talk about this clip. So actually let's listen again. It's a very important point that Chris makes here. So let's start it. It's about a minute.
Impediments to third parties is precisely because of the two-party corporate duopoly, which has conspired essentially to prevent any kind of effective electoral challenge. So yes, it's going to be extremely difficult. They're going to throw every impediment they can in terms of third parties, but we're going to have to remain fast. And let me also add, the problem with running as a Democrat is that the working class is fully aware that the greatest betrayal that they have endured has come from the Democratic Party, and in particular,
they want to make it seem like the white working class specifically is moving away from the Democrats because they're racist, and not because they know they know who have devastated their lives, their savings, their homes. They know what party did that. They know the Clintons. So Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate from the jump. From the jump. I would say she was more underwater than any other candidate just coming in the race up until Donald Trump. Just underwater based off of their personality, their history, their sort of public persona. So yeah, she was a terrible candidate, specifically because of the working class. And where did she lose? Michigan. Right? So, but the narrative they want to give is that they're racist. That's why all the white working class, all of a sudden at the same time, turned on their racist switch that they didn't have, they had shut off before that, when they were all right to be in the party. Just saying. So, yeah, let's let him finish the point here.
Particular the Clinton administration. So in my book, America, the Farewell Tour, I wrote a chapter out of Anderson, Indiana, which used to be a huge center for GM plants. Well, after NAFTA, GM literally ripped down they moved all the machinery to Monterrey, Mexico, and then ripped down the plants and left giant weed-choked lots surrounded by cyclone fencing. And then, of course, Anderson fell into the kind of tailspin that many former industrial centers have fallen into. And I talked to the old UAW leadership, and they said they were never going to vote for Clinton. They're not unaware of who did this to them.
Never going to vote for Clinton, just to that point. So just wanted to drive home that point. But anyway, let's get now to the first clip. So like I said, this kind of spun off for Twitter. I was watching a video from Jacobin. Yeah, I was watching a video from Jacobin. If you didn't know, Anna Kasparian, I don't know if she still does, but used to have a show on the weekends. I just discovered this about a month, maybe 2 weeks ago, because I pulled something else and when I went on there to do research for Catherine Liu, that's when I discovered this. So, this content that I found, I was watching, and I clipped some clips off of it and put them on Twitter, and the reaction that I got, or that we got, because all of us were participating in this. So the reaction that we got, which one am I sharing here? This one. So let's change this one. 1 second, everybody. Okay, so this is the tweet, right? Yeah, this is the tweet. So I pulled it. It was an episode where I'm sorry, his name is listed here. I can't see it very good. Nando, I think that's an N. This lettering's over it, and then Anna, and then they had David Sirota as a guest. And so
Jeffrey Katzenberg, simply because I didn't immediately fall.
Let me just play you the clip, and then we can discuss it at the end. Let me see if I can. I guess when we play it, I'll be able to see his name.
I'm going to break my own ground rule. Jimmy Dore keeps accusing me of taking money from NATO. He's insane. He's literally out of his mind, batshit crazy. Accusing people of things that you have no evidence of. I personally took $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg simply because I didn't immediately fall in line and say this is fantastic. I don't even want to discuss it. 100% support it. We can't have a discussion about anything else. We need to do this and let's move on. That's not a good faith person. Well, I think there are people who agree with him, right? And I'm interested in having a discussion with them, not interested in having a discussion with someone who has no evidence for anything and goes around, slinging mud and causing these ridiculous divisions within, a group of people who overwhelmingly agree with one another on these issues.
Right. And I think there's something bigger than just any one personality. I think it's that you have to be able to honestly assess who is on your side and who isn't. And frankly, I don't think it's that hard to figure out who's on your side and who isn't. In other words, it's pretty clear who the corporate Democrats are. It's pretty clear who the progressive supporters of Medicare for All are. By the way, a floor vote would help make that as clear as possible, I think, or at least more clear in the U.S. House of Representatives itself. But I think that, you know, demonizing people that we all know are actually on the side of this fight, demonizing them because they may disagree or have different views about what the best strategy is, that is deeply counterproductive.
Yeah, so that video spurred a lot of conversation, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of it right here. Just taking you through how we got to this conversation. Oops, sorry.
Left.
Sorry about that. So now let me take you to some of the reaction. I went too far back. Sorry about that. So here is some of the reaction. And then I add that there. So here's one. I would agree. It doesn't even matter if she takes money from NATO. She has the talking points of someone who takes money from NATO. So whether she takes the money or does it for free, what difference would it make? The results is the same either way. And then someone puts this here. It's is this one? Yeah. Is this in the thread? Yeah. Wow. Oh, this is off topic though, but hang on a second. Click on it. More replies. Hold on. All right, there we go. Sorry, I knew there was more. Anyway, so here we go. David Soros is manufacturing consent, and it makes me sick. We have a difference, and what we see as people doing considered actions, and your comfort level allows you to keep putting off the fact that these people are doing nothing to change even their district's lives. It's sick. So I think I get you. I think you get the sentiment from sort of what the reaction to that first video. So let me pause here before I show you the next clip and how we got here, to say that today we want to analyze the strategy divide between reformists, whom some of you may call PMCs, like professional managerial class. They've had the name reformist, boutique left, this sort of class, and sort of the more revolutionary leftists. So the strategy divide, which I saw in this content that I was watching on Jacobin. I was not necessarily trying to rehash force to vote, because that's not what we're going to do, but using force to vote to analyze how our strategies, we're not looking to do the same things. So that puts us on two different paths that may never be a coalition, even though there's overlapping issues. And I'll explain in just a moment here. So let's go now to one other thing I wanted to say. As I'm doing that, I'll bring up the next video here. So, oops. Okay, my daughter is gaming. She must be, my computer's moving slow. So let me show you the second clip. And for whatever reason, this is a more popular clip of the three that I posted. But let me set it up here, or finish discussing what I have written down here. So just making sure I'm using this. So yeah, I can say this part. So the strategy divide may actually mean we can't have a coalition. We have to really understand what these two groups are looking for. One is looking for change through the already built apparatus. The other group is looking for change to change the apparatus. There's no way to have overlapping strategies with these two different goals. There's no way to have overlapping strategies with these two different goals. So what's up, Nick? Wow, he blocked me too. He blocked RBN too. Yeah, so we're all blocked. It's a challenge. It's challenge. You know, we're the Black Panthers. I'm sorry. Let me not say that. We would aspire to be the Black Panthers in that shot, in that scene where they show up to the California legislators. It's like RBN showed up to the leftist movement and said, "Hold on, there's been a lot of bad advice being given around this motherfucker, and it's time for us to stop this shit." And it's like they're closing their doors, shutting us off. They're shutting us off because they can't handle the conversation. They can't handle angry Black people in the town square who's saying, stop this milquetoast bullshit and start doing something that's really going to bring about change for the people at the very bottom. Because what I can say about their strategy of using this apparatus is using a corrupt apparatus means you're not going to be able to structurally change enough for the people at the very bottom. They even admit that. They even admit electoral politics is not going to bring. So you're basically saying you're doing electoral politics. That's not going to bring about any substantial change for the people who need it the most. That's a flawed strategy. So the title, what's the title of this? The realignment of the left. And it feels like this is a realignment. They're calling us crazy for wanting to team up with the working class, believe it or not. The spooky Trump supporters. The ones, where was that union? Amazon union in Trump country? So I guess none of those people who fought for that union ever thought about voting for Trump, don't have parents who voted for Trump, aren't conservative. They want to down talk that and call that crazy. But it's not crazy to keep beating the same dead horse, knowing that dead horse, even if you're able to resuscitate it, can't deliver for the very people at the bottom. That is just something we cannot right here. I was looking for that word. We cannot be this. We have to be militant. And I have a couple of clips to show here from Kashama. So we're basically, because anytime, so what I'm going to do is use academics to make RBN's point, to make my point. Because if I'm just saying it, a college dropout from Compton, it's just that you know, the brown guy, he's just saying, yeah, just let him. But when you bring up academics that they all respect, that they've had, some of them had on their shows, making your point. So that's what we're going to be doing today. This is a realignment of the left. It's like they are detaching themselves from the left and what is the right word? They're and reattaching themselves to liberals. That's what it feels like. Being okay with NATO, being okay with the squad voting for funding of NATO, progressives, and then still saying, let's go ahead and support this group because they're our best shot. Our best shot is voting to fund NATO. Nick, did you hear me, Nick? Our best shot that the PMC class keeps telling us is our best shot, the professional managerial class keep telling us our best shot, they just voted for NATO. This is a serious conversation. So let me play this video. I'm completely not even keeping my schedule here, but let me I didn't even think of that before to have that written down. So let's listen to this clip. Yeah, just listen. Now this one is the one that surpassed the first one. This had, the first one had like 3,000 views ahead, and for some reason this one has surpassed. Maybe what he says. Let's listen.
Example. Okay. AOC, if AOC does not, and the squad does not use their leverage to force a floor vote or try to force a floor vote, I'm not prepared to say that means that they don't believe in Medicare for all or that they're sellouts. I'm not prepared to. The evidence is overwhelmingly against that. That they may disagree with the tactic, and I may disagree with them for their position on the tactic on not forcing a Medicare for all vote. But I'm not willing to say, nor do I believe that that means that they don't want to pass Medicare for all or aren't willing to fight as hard as possible for Medicare for all. It could just be that they have a different theory of change. And when you take a strategic...
So I'm going to replay this part and make my point. So let's hear it again.
For their position on the tactic on not forcing a Medicare for all vote. But I'm not willing to say, nor do I believe that that means that they don't want to pass Medicare for all or aren't willing to fight as hard as possible for Medicare for all.
So a tactic that would immediately, as far as time-wise, at least get the bill in the public square by way of being on the floor. Now I must say he is sort of for force the vote. So he's sort of for it, but just not as forcefully as some of us are.
For their position on the tactic on not forcing a Medicare for all vote. But I'm not willing to say, nor do I believe that that means that they don't.
So this is the point I was going to make. I needed to hear him say this again. It's like, it's not like if we were all throwing the squad out based only on force to vote, I can see you having a point of, why are we saying they are co-opted, they are this, they are that. And I'm not willing to go there is basically what he's saying. But if you're only talking about this one thing, the conclusion has been reached that they have sort of been sold out, bought out, or they have sold out, is because of a multitude of things that has happened, not one singular thing. So let's let him finish his point.
Don't want to pass Medicare for all or aren't willing to fight as hard as possible for Medicare for all. It could just be that they have a different theory of change. And when you take a strategic...
it could be they just have a different theory of change. A different theory of change. If you and I are in a burning house and it takes both of us to get out of this situation, and your theory is that is to use a kid's water gun, you see how your theory of change is problematic for me? The strategy is not meeting the moment. Just like Joe Biden is the president that's not meeting this moment of the pandemic, of war, of evictions, of the poor, of inflation, how he's not meeting the moment. The strategy of using the Democratic Party after all of this is not meeting the moment. And therein lies the problem. The strategy of being this sort of technical sort of Democrat, this technical sort of person. Well, let's get this committee seat and let's do this. We don't have time for that. because that strategy is literally a 30-year strategy. Because it's not going to take seriously more than one person getting a committee chair, somebody doing this. It takes way more than that. So the strategy, I'm going to keep saying this, the strategy, this electoral strategy that you're trying to implore, and I'm saying you as in the PMC, which David Sirota represents, it's not meeting the moment. We're going to need something better than this. So let me now, did I finish? Oh, let me let him finish talking.
Difference and try to broaden it to be a difference of values. If you don't have evidence that is rational and logical to do that, what you're doing is you're undermining people who are really on your side and who are trying to do the right thing.
Are they really on our side if they're voting to increase NATO? Are they really on our side if they're voting to increase police funding? Or is it just they're on our side on certain things and certain things just, whatever? So let's get to the main, or one of the main videos. Let me find it. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So a lot of backup. So I do have a lot of reference videos. So we'll start here, but once I have to make another point, I'll go ahead and switch that up and then come back to this video. So this is the video that started it all, where I got the clip from. I'm just because this is one I
before
didn't,
you spend a bunch of money on cookware, let me tell you.
This is one I just had not come across. I thought I had searched Jacobin for David Sirota before, and I thought I saw all the content, and then I saw this today popped up. And so I wanted to check this out. So now I'm going to fast forward it to when David shows up. And we're going to listen to maybe 15 minutes of the conversation and kind of rebut a couple of things here. So that's where we're going to get started here. What is it? 56. Let me see if it's showing here. Make sure everything is set up before we start the video. 56. Where are we? Okay, right there. We start here. This is close enough. So let's begin here, and I'll stop it when I'm ready to interject.
And since we're having a discussion about power and what we can do, I think it's important to bring David Sirota in now, who's been discussing strategy, debating strategy about what progressives can do to win all week. I'm sure you're exhausted by this conversation, David, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So look, I want to, I think, set some ground rules because I really want to have a substantive discussion and not make this about any type of personalities. And so this is specifically about strategy and what we can do to use whatever leverage progressive lawmakers have in the House to get things done. And so there has been a proposal to hold the vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And unless she agrees to taking Medicare for All to a floor vote, then progressive lawmakers should avoid voting for her. And so that's a little bit of.
So let me make sure. I want to say it again. This is not to really focus on force the vote and rehash that. This is really about the strategy of being adversarial, militant, and being milquetoast. That's really what I'm wanting to address in the two camps, the reformist camp, which I would put PMC's professional managerial class, the boutique left, the Brahmin left, which is So anyway, I won't go into that.
little bit of leverage that progressive lawmakers have, and there's been a big debate all week about whether or not that strategy makes a lot of sense. And so, David, I really appreciated your piece in, the Daily Poster, where you provided some specific, nuanced examples of other things that progressive.
So let me just say this: David is obviously for the strategy. That's the vibe I got from watching it. The dynamic between the two, between Anna, and both of them know that, and they're both trying to delicately talk about certain parts of this. And David stretches the definition of things to not offend Anna so much about forced to vote. And when we get there, I'll explain.
Progressives can do in addition to a Medicare for all floor vote. So do you want to just quickly talk about what those options are?
Sure. I think there's a lot of things that the House Democrats could try to do if they wanted to, and to leverage that vote for Nancy Pelosi. For instance, they don't have to just ask for a vote on Medicare for all. They could ask for a vote on 2 or 3 or 4 bills that are in Congress that deal with the same issue. For instance, Ro Khanna has an existing bill to allow states to help states do their own single-payer Medicare for all programs. And if you know the history of Medicare for all in, for instance, a place like Canada, you know that it started at the provincial level. So actually passing something that empowers the states to take action is historically has been helpful. It engages state legislators. We don't actually know where members of Congress really are on that issue. And we have an HHS secretary, or an incoming HHS secretary, who has said he actually supports doing that kind of thing. So getting folks on record on an issue like that, in addition to a Medicare for all floor vote, is something that you can ask for. You can ask the Democrats and Pelosi and the Democratic leadership to put a letter together, an initiative together, to tell Joe Biden to use the existing executive authority that he will have to expand Medicare in the middle of this pandemic. We haven't seen any organizing around that. I mean, the incredible thing to me, which is sort of sad, is that there's sort of this idea out there that Joe Biden won the election, therefore that's over. So whatever Joe Biden does is fine, and can't really fight it or pressure him, and that we have to focus only for now on what's going on, for instance, in the U.S. House. It sort of gives a pass to Joe Biden, as opposed to saying Joe Biden actually will have the power with the stroke of a pen to expand Medicare if he wanted to. Why hasn't there been any organizing around that? Why haven't the House Democrats, the Democrats in Congress, moved aggressively to put the pressure on him to do that? So that's another thing. The other thing that can be done right now, which is directly right in the House, which I know some people roll their eyes at because it's I guess technical or wonky. I don't particularly think it is to replace the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee with somebody.
Yes, that's because it is technical. This is what I mean. This sort of these tactics of these technical moves, getting on a committee seat. That's literally a strategy of decades to accomplish anything. You think one person is going to get a committee seat and everything changes? No, it's going to take a lot of committee seats by the same type of people unbought. I mean, I just don't understand. Anyway, I'll reserve. Let's let him say some more, and then I'm going to speak on it.
Somebody right now, it's somebody who opposes Medicare for all, and put in a Medicare for all supporter. And that's not a small thing. That's a huge thing. If you know the history of Medicare itself, you would know how
this is where the friction comes in. Is that we have a segment of people who are left where none of these sort of policy issues matters, whether the legislation for any of these policy issues doesn't make a difference for them. So what I'm saying is they have health care. So whether Medicare for all is passed or not now doesn't make a difference. $15 minimum wage. He's a millionaire. So waiting on that for a committee assignment, like, we have two diverging sort of goals or timetables. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. They have a longer timetable for these things that people who are living through the harsher conditions of capitalism, those people, you tell them, go do all this work and then come out and vote just to get a committee assignment. What the fuck? What does that do for me? Well, in 2 years, we'll be able to, what? You see the problem? How can those two different ideologies strategize together? Where they're literally on a 30-year mortgage and we're on a month to month. How is that? So let's listen to some more.
Important it is to have a Ways and Means Committee chairperson, because that's the committee that oversees the legislation. You would know how important it is to have a Medicare for all supporter in that job.
And let me also talk about more of the realignment part right here, because what I mean by realigning is that you're having a lot of consciousness on the left being turned up. You have a lot of people who were democratic socialists who are now a lot further left than that. I can remember a lot of us claiming democratic socialists like 2 years ago. Maybe it was more than 2 years ago. So there's that sort of like far left, and it's based off conditions not getting better. Then you have sort of like who the new Democratic Party is, which is rich liberals, whose goals are completely different than a poor worker. Completely different. The timetable they have is completely different. So you're seeing a sort of Overton window shift where you have these same leftists, these PMC class, they're also fine with a little bit of imperialism, just a little bit. So there's that shift. And it happens to be some of the same people. They're rationalizing NATO. They're rationalizing war. So that's, to me, is the realigning. It's almost like they're being baked into the middle, sort of joining an involuntary coalition with liberals, with the Ukraine flag liberals. Think about it. The Rokanas, he's a Justice Democrat. He's progressive. He's supposed to be a progressive. You hear what he said about Pelosi taking a trip to Taiwan? So there's a realigning on the left that's happening. We also kind of saw it, or we also kind of discussed it with me and Nick with Catherine Liu. It was sort of on this topic of there's a splitting where of people who call themselves lefts who are saying maybe the working class is not the vehicle we're going to use to get change because they're not necessarily part of the working class. And the things that the working class want may not be necessarily the things they want. So we're having this split. So let's listen to a little bit more here, and then there's a couple of more clips. I'm going to interject and then come back here.
That job. The New Yorker did a longer piece about this. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, about how Ways and Means Committee Chairman Wilbur Mills, back in the 60s, ended up holding up Medicare singularly for years until he was pressured and convinced to move off that. So there's been those are some ideas, and the problem that I've had with some of the discussion here is that these are ideas to say, yes, a Medicare for all vote would be important, but we need to actually ask for more in order to expect to get anything. That what we have learned over and over again from Congress is that if you don't ask for a whole loaf, you probably won't get you won't get a crumb. If you ask for a crumb, you'll get nothing. So in asking for only,
so he's saying you should ask for more. I think I'm hearing here
one thing that is important, but doesn't really put Nancy Pelosi necessarily in a position where she really doesn't want to have to do something. If you don't ask for that, then it's not clear you're going to get much of anything. And the thing that's been disturbing is that even just saying that, which I think is a logical, earnest, honest kind of statement, even saying that has generated recriminations of, oh, people are selling out, people are corrupt, people are trying to help the Democrats.
It's like he's erasing the history. It's like this is the, umpteenth time your constituency, as far as ideological constituency, is saying, hey, do this, do that, or what about this, or what about that, and you don't do it. So this is after many disappointments, not one, many.
Democratic establishment. And the problem is that we need to be able to discuss issues of tactics and strategy without it devolving into, if you disagree with me on strategy, or not even if you disagree with me, if you want to add something to the strategy, that must mean you are an evil, corrupt, self-dealing establishment.
You see how his writing skills came in there? He was very descriptive, right? That's his pain being shown there.
And that is not helpful to anyone. It is not helpful to the movement. It is not helpful to the potential, hopefully, the outcome of actually guaranteeing healthcare to all, an outcome that lots of us have been working for decades on.
Yeah, and Nando, sorry, I wanted to just add one quick thing to it because.
So Nando is his name. I'm not sure if I said it right earlier.
David mentioned the House Ways and Means Committee, and I agree with you. Out of all of the different, kind of proposals you had in your piece, that was the one that appealed to me the most because the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee is Richie Neal, who is awful, absolutely awful, and has successfully defeated efforts to end surprise medical billing. He's very much in cahoots with the private healthcare industry, and getting rid of him or shifting the power away from a corporate Democrat and to, an actual progressive is really important in that committee. I agree with you. I don't think that's wonky at all. And let's
be clear. I want to just make one point about that. One additional point. That is something that Nancy Pelosi could literally do. She could do that today, now. If she woke up today and was like, I don't want Richard Neal to be the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, that could happen right now with her essentially singularly. So that's an ask, a demand that she could actually deliver on herself. She can't even, sort of, for the most part, she can't even really say, well, look, I got to get this member or that member to agree to it. She is literally running for speaker. The job of the speaker is to appoint the chair. So that's an ask that's actually even more singularly to Nancy Pelosi than any ask.
And I want to ask you, David, because I'm meaning to ask you something about this, because a lot of the focus has been on AOC and her whatever parliamentary kind of maneuver she decides to do on this. I want to ask, because on the one hand, there's this push to get her to, maybe withhold her vote against Pelosi to get these concessions. While at the same time, there was just the news broke yesterday that there was.
I would like to just reiterate the whole thing we were sold on this whole Justice Democrat inside game strategy was that these people were going to be the Tea Party of the left, be going there and be adversarial. And people expect them to be adversarial. And when they don't, they get criticized. And it's a problem. It's a problem that we have the expectation that they told us from the beginning of this strategy.
There was like a secret meeting in which they kind of excluded her from the Energy and Commerce Committee. It's all very kind of like inside the Capitol, and it's something that I don't understand that well. And I just wanted to ask you, like, how much power can AOC like credibly threaten Pelosi's speakership? And what did you make of this kind of maneuver on the Energy and Commerce Committee?
Look, I think that the who becomes speaker is ultimately, there is a full vote of the House, and each party votes for their potential speaker candidate. Typically what happens is that each party first has a meeting of their committee or their conference, and they have an internal election. Frankly, it's not binding. The only binding election is the actual official House vote, but they have a non-binding intra-party election to say, here's who is our speaker designate that we'll put on the floor to vote on. And so in theory, if enough Democrats withheld their vote for speaker, for their own party's speaker designate, then neither party would have a majority necessary to elect a House speaker. And things can get haywire at that point. I lived in Montana, as one example. I lived in Montana where this very kind of thing happened. And what ended up happening was you had a Democratic House majority in Montana with a Republican speaker. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen here.
Right. So why are you saying it? Why are you giving an example that doesn't fit here? What is the purpose of that? Anybody in the comments? What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of you giving an example saying what we ended up was as a Democratic legislator and a Republican, I forget whatever it was going to say, leader? I'm not saying that's going to happen because it's not. And I do have another video where he went on Jimmy Dore, and this very thing about Kevin McCarthy came up. Trying to keep the illusion that Kevin McCarthy could have possibly gotten that seat, which is ridiculous. So if I have time, I'll show that video. But let's finish this one.
But what I'm saying is that things can get pretty chaotic and dicey, and that is real leverage that progressives in the House have. And
they have real leverage. Has anyone, I know somebody have said this before, why can't the squad, progressives, Ro Khanna, use the same leverage that Joe Manchin uses? What is the difference? Is it that he's using his for good? Is the allowed to do it because that's what they actually want to have happen? And the squad is not allowed to do it because then it would have to go left. This is the ratchet. Let's continue.
And I think it's been important to underscore that leverage exists and it can be used. That has been a very important and good thing that has been underscored today.
It just doesn't make any sense that they have this leverage and they're not using it unless they're scared. And it goes back to the question I just asked. How come Joe Manchin is not scared unless that's part of the whole game? If the fear can be put into AOC and all these other people, how come the fear can't be put into Joe Manchin? Unless Joe Manchin is executing exactly what the Democratic Party wants to have happen, because they're controlled by the same donors that the Republicans are controlled by. So anybody just tuning in who says, yeah, Republicans and Democrats, they're very, let me explain to you. So we're going to just cut, stop the topic here. They are being funded by the same people. So let me give you an example. I've used this many times. Let's say I'm Pfizer. I'm the company Pfizer. I'm ready to give out money. I have an economic plan. I want to push through this legislation that's going to benefit me, Pfizer. I'm donating to the Republicans and Democrats. Is my plan from Pfizer different whether a Republican or a Democrat is in office? Does that change Pfizer's plan? No. So whether a Republican or a Democrat is in office, they're executing the same plan, the singular plan of Pfizer. So now let's get back to the video. I think, is this where I have, hang on a second. This might be where I have the segue video here. Let's bring in this other video. Because there's several sort of points that's made here that I kind of just want to listen to, and we'll get back to this video. So let's go to this next video. So sort of show like the contrast. So Chris Hedges and Kashama Tawan went on Bad Faith podcast with Brianna Joy Gray and spoke about strategies outside of the Democratic Party. But actually, they were asked about strategies, including the Democratic Party, and they both explicitly say, no way. So these are academics saying the same thing that RBN is saying. So let's listen. Let me find the first. There's a couple of parts here. So let's just go down the line. 514. So let's listen to the first point that Chris makes here. I think I have the right video up, right? Yes.
All right, I'm going to be straight up with you. I paid for this ad because I want to give you a...
All right, so let's go
and
down.
now they have protested Biden's recent speech on voting rights issues. And so I'm curious what you two make of the moment right now and what the left should make of it as we head into this midterm year. Strategically, where should we be positioned in this moment?
So we have to return to the only formula that has ever worked, and that's class warfare.
This is the problem that the PMC class has. The strategy to win the liberation of the most oppressed, the strategy to structurally change things for the people at the bottom of the totem pole,
to return to the only,
requires class warfare. Guess what? Some of the PMCs are in the class we would be fighting against. You see how that situation blurs the line for them as far as what's the appropriate strategy. Because they're in the class that we must go to war with, now it's not as clear that the working class is the apparatus for change. Maybe we could do something else. There's too many racist Trump supporters in the white working class selling you that nonsense. So let's listen some more to Chris. I'll rewind it to the beginning of what he said here, or to Bree.
Now being told there's nothing that Joe Biden can do with respect to voting rights, and not even to mention George Floyd Act, which is no one's talked about in almost a year. And now they have protested Biden's recent speech on voting rights issues. And so I'm curious what you two make of the moment right now and what the left should make of it as we head into this midterm year. Strategically, where should we be positioned in this moment?
We have to return to the only formula that has ever worked, and that's class warfare. The fact is that the corporate state has carried out this corporate coup d'etat, and we're almost starting from ground zero. But as you mentioned, we are seeing these grassroots organizations, Starbucks, Kellogg's, and other places begin to organize. This is the only power the working class has. The only thing that workers have to sell is their labor. They have almost no ability individually to influence state or economic policy. Corporate capitalists, without outside pressure, will not only dominate and fleece workers, but direct state institutions to serve their interests at the expense of the working class. And the Democratic Party has become a full partner in this assault on the working class. It has betrayed the working class and taken sides against us in the class warfare. So we have to return to the language of class conflict. We will find our strength.
Now, in all of what he said there, I'm going to rewind it a little bit, is why the PMC class has an issue with organizing the working class. This is why we're at this crossroads of realigning. Our interests are different. Our interests are different. So let me play a little more of this part here. And then there's another section I'm going to fast forward it to.
In these nascent strikes and movements. I mean, history has shown this out. Whether you go back to the 1930s, the GM strikes, or look at Sweden, which created, it's been largely dismantled, but created a very strong, well-organized trade union movement that was then allied with the Social Democratic Workers' Party of Sweden. That's what we need. That's what we need to do. And investing energy, time, hope in the Democratic Party.
Building a working class, building up working class unions, which develops into a working class party. You see how that cuts out the PMC's sort of voice of ruling things, and why they wouldn't want to do that. Build up a working class through union power. Build up their consciousness, that is. And then from there, develop a working class party for the working class. So the things they're going to be asking for aren't the same things that the PMC class is asking for. This is a class divide. Let's continue.
Is futile. I mean, even the filibuster, it's all political theater. The Biden White House is well aware that there's no chance at all they're going to overturn the filibuster. They don't have the votes for it.
Yep. It's interesting because there's some narrative discourse right now in the mainstream media about the fact that these voting rights advocates boycotted Biden's speech. And the mainstream media, the corporate media discourses, what are they really doing? What do they hope? What purpose does this serve? The Pod Save guys, I mean, they all stopped just short of openly criticizing the activists. I think probably because they've put them on this kind of pedestal in the past and they're unwilling to quite go there so far. But it's clear that they are being dismissed. And I am reluctant to agree with those corporate media figures, but there is a part of me that is sympathetic only because it feels like a tantrum, only because they should have known already that they had given up their leverage the second they said that they were going to vote for Joe Biden. No.
Yeah, the leverage was given up. Let me push it forward to 1906 to the next point here. Let's see who this. I think this is Kashama in this next one. Let's listen.
The election campaign we do run on the left. I don't think we have to. I don't believe that the electoralist route is the right way to go, which may seem strange to people that I'm saying that after having won 3 elections and defeated the recall. But that is precisely why we are saying this, because we don't believe that one or two elected positions are where it's at. But what
Right, 1 or 2 committee assignments, 1 or 2, like that's not the strategy. That's going to take years, decades.
what we do want to do is provide a way forward for, politically to become separated, to really extricate our
Right, to create the path. I think the whole third party creation may have been doomed from the start, because it's still in this quick cycling created out of thin air. It has to be created out of the working class struggle. And that's how you get people to also have that trust, because the politician or the person running for office would come out of the movement, not a movement created around the person. That's what happened to Bernie Sanders, and that's what happens out of all politicians. The movement is created around the person instead of the person coming out of the movement. So, and that's not get out of this cycle. You have to understand the movement is not on the electoral cycle. So you're not gonna, in 4 years. No, it's not in 4 years. This is an ongoing thing. So you have to get out of that sort of thinking, the timetable of the duopoly, the timetable of electoral politics. That is not the focus. That is not the main thing. So let's continue with this part here.
Ourselves from the stranglehold of the Democratic Republican sort of, duopoly. How do we do that? You can't, I don't think we are in a position to say, well, let's have some labor militancy, then we'll do a political party. I think it has to be part of the same political conversation. And every year, every time that we have run an election campaign, we have run it on that basis, meaning we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know that we're going to win on day one. We don't know we are going to we fight like hell to win. Yes, and we have won victories. But every year that we run the election, the goal is not the election result itself. The goal is to raise the consciousness of workers.
The goal is not the election itself. The goal is to raise consciousness of the worker. This is the difference. Reformist goal is just to win the election. Because you want to just technically get these items done through the corrupt process we already have, the corrupt apparatus. And we're saying, no, we have to begin to pivot away and walk away from the red and blue. If we never start, we're never going to get there. So this idea that the PMC class wants you to have an already made party before, because that's the critique of the Green Party. They're not going to have the wins that the red and blue team had, the corrupt team that created the system. Having the expectation of the Green Party that you have of that, it's just you're beginning to break away. And every cycle, more people are breaking away, which is not even the point. The Green Party would not be the point. It's saying stop voting for them is gaining the power. More and more is leaving. The point is all this stuff we're doing in the background, the organizing, the feeding the community, the community outreach, the providing the material needs so that we can organize. So let's continue. So this to me is the realigning. Is that simply we have we have the PMCs, we have the professional managerial class that's part of the left, who simply have different wants and needs than the working class. So this is an odd coupling. So let's listen to a little. Wait, let me see where the next one is. Yeah, let me fast forward to the next one then. 22. All right, so let's see what this point is here.
New poll numbers came out today showing new lows for Joe Biden, and people on the left aren't satisfied, I think, at this moment, saying, oh gosh, Biden's not doing very well, they really want an opportunity to telegraph their discontent that is something other than staying at home, which can be construed as, you just are disaffected, you're just lazy, you're just sitting out, you are giving up your civic responsibility. And to that end, I wonder what you make about some of these options that have been floated as a third-party candidate. And do you think there will be, and should be a challenger, a progressive challenger, whether they run on the Democratic Party ticket or as a third party, to Joe Biden in 2024?
There absolutely should be a progressive challenger from the left in a militant campaign. I absolutely don't think it should be from the Democratic Party. And I do want to address the specific names that you brought up. But before doing that, I want to say it's much more about the strategy, the political strategy that we as working people use to bring a real challenge to the Democratic and Republican candidates. And the starting point, the ABCs of that strategy are you don't run as a Democrat. Because look at what they did to Bernie Sanders. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry of progressive Democrats.
You see how clearly she's saying if you want to do the bidding of the working class, you cannot do it on either of these corporate parties. That's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. But and when it's said by academics and a politician or a socialist with some clout, then it's given a little more validity. So I'm going to let her continue to make the point that we're making.
Supported Bernie in 2020. They were, when I went to the Tacoma Dome to speak at Bernie's rally, they were all there with me. I know these people, they don't support Bernie's politics, but they were there because it was so easy. There was nothing at stake to get on the Bernie bandwagon at that time, and yet then go ahead and support Biden once Bernie was crushed, because we all knew that was going to happen. The Democratic Party elite were going to use some trick or another to get Bernie off the books. And then you got James Clyburn, you got South Carolina, and lo and behold, it happened. We didn't know exactly how it would happen, but we knew it would happen. So the first obligation we have as people on the left, if we are serious organizers, if we have any loyalty to the working class, is to first be crystal clear about that. Whether it makes you popular or not, be crystal clear. The Democratic Party is not the way to go. And
that last line there, if you're here and the working class is your top priority, the Democratic Party is not the way to go.
At that time, and yet then go ahead and support Biden once Bernie was crushed, because we all knew that was going to happen. The Democratic Party elite were going to use some trick or another to get Bernie off the books. And then you got James Clyburn, you got South Carolina, and lo and behold, it happened. We didn't know exactly how it would happen, but we knew it would happen. So the first obligation we have as people on the left, if we are serious organizers, if we have any loyalty to the working class,
if we are serious organizers, if we have any loyalties to the working class, the first thing we must do
is to first be crystal clear about that. Whether it makes you popular or not, be crystal clear. The Democratic Party is not the way to go. And I don't want
be crystal clear. The Democratic Party is not the way to go. And I can stop it there. I'm going to pause it there. Let's stay there. So that we can pick back up here. But I do want to go back to the original video where we left off. Or was that Twitter? Yeah, no, it was here. So go back to this original video and with Anna David Sirota. So we've sort of heard their sort of strategy based around the framing of force the vote. Then I took you and let you listen to Chris and Kashama and sort of a different sort of strategy that we are advocating here. You see the difference. You see the strategy divide, and it's no real way to we want to be adversarial and they want to sort of cozy up and be friendly to get committee seats. So let's pick back up where we left off and continue.
Is real leverage that progressives in the House have. And I think it's been important to underscore that leverage exists and it can be used. That has been a very important and good thing that has been underscored today. Where it goes from there, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I mean, the next in line who's been angling for speaker is Hakeem Jeffries, who's also a conservative, corporate-friendly Democrat. Would you get conservative Democrats actually voting for a quote-unquote moderate Republican House member? I put that in quotes because I'm not sure there are any moderates. I mean, we just don't know. But I think a game of brinksmanship is important if you're trying to extract concessions from Pelosi, especially concessions that I believe should be the absolute minimum that should be expected. A floor vote on Medicare for all, a floor vote on Ro Khanna's bill about state Medicare for all legislation. I mean, this shouldn't even be hard for Nancy Pelosi to deliver. It isn't hard for her to deliver because it's on the Medicare for all vote. I don't think I'm undermining the Medicare for all movement, but I think we would all agree that it is probably doomed to fail. Doesn't mean it's not important. It is important as an organizing tool, but it's already probably a predetermined outcome. So the fact that isn't the expectation already tells us a lot about how rigged the system already is against guarantee.
So she's not for force to vote, and she's really pissed at Jimmy Dore. Then he comes on, and I'm assuming they know he's quasi for force to vote, but he's trying to make it seem like he has a different position, and not come so hard at Anna by saying mine is to do more, to ask for more, but it's still forced to vote.
Healthcare to all Americans. And I want to bring up something else from history about this. We know that the Democratic Party has tried to avoid uncomfortable votes on healthcare
So let's listen to this example he gives here.
12 years ago. I was thinking about this last night. I was remembering the history of this. 12 years ago, there was a whole effort to force the Senate Democrats to vote to allow a floor vote on a public health insurance option, something that's even more modest than Medicare for all. I was part of the campaign here in Colorado to pressure my Democratic senator to use his power, because every senator had the power, to call for an open floor vote on a public option at the end of the debate on the Affordable Care Act. And not one Democrat stood up to even call for a vote. Now, there was a strategic argument there. The argument was that if we allow for amendments on this bill, it will allow the Republicans to offer amendments. And if the bill gets changed, it will go back to the House, and the Affordable Care Act itself, the whole bill, may end up getting taken down. I didn't agree with that strategy. I absolutely didn't agree with that strategy. I thought that argument was wrong. However, and this is an important point, the people who were making that argument, I didn't think that people in the labor movement, I didn't think that Bernie Sanders, I didn't think that progressive Democrats, who ultimately essentially accepted that strategy, I didn't think they were sellouts. I didn't accuse them, of not being on the same page. It got heated, but
this is a terrible analogy he's trying to pass over as some sort of this is a terrible example that he's trying to pass off as some sort of analogy to force the vote. So, I mean, this is clearly not the same thing. He's talking about having a debate on the public option in the middle of the passage of Obamacare. That's not even that's worlds apart, David, and I think that's worlds apart. An example, I guess, a closer analogy to what you're bringing up is if we're about to pass Medicare for all, and somebody says, "What about nationalizing healthcare?" And then they say, "Pause that vote." That's your example. You see the difference? So who would be upset with that? Who would be upset with Medicare for all passing and at the last minute not doing a debate on nationalized health care, but Medicare for all is passing? You see how this is a terrible example he's trying to use to act like that's the reason why they did that, but you had Obamacare passing. This is a terrible example. It's either showing your lack of understanding of this, or you're either showing that you believe the people listening to you are stupid. Not to clearly see that, say these aren't not even the same sort of things that you're trying to act like are analogies. These aren't the same things. So a better example for your situation would be, but see, this is not even using Obamacare, because Obamacare, nobody had to force anybody to put Obamacare on the floor. So you get what I'm saying? This is not even a good example. So let's just leave it there. It's not a good example to use.
But, you know, it was like, you know, good faith allies can disagree tactically on good faith efforts to try to achieve a goal. I think
we don't see any good faith efforts on trying to achieve a goal coming from anybody in Congress. We don't see any good faith efforts towards that. Writing a bill that you know is never going to go to the floor doesn't give, you're not getting credit for that. Co-sponsoring a bill that you know is never going to the Senate, never making it to the floor, never making it out of committee, so you write it so you can tell your constituency, look what I wrote. We already peeped that game already.
But I also think at the same time that back then the Democrats created the situation by which it was harder to even get a vote. In other words, it wasn't coincidental that just getting an open floor vote in the Senate on a public option was considered controversial or potentially strategically dangerous. That was, in a sense, an engineered situation to try to prevent a vote. So all of that goes back to the idea that while a vote at one level on any of these issues should be an easy ask, there is a clear pattern, a history of the Democratic Party not even wanting to hold an open vote on these issues. And I think it's because ultimately they don't want to get crosswise with a very powerful industry, the healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's talk about a floor vote actually happening, right? Somehow, miraculously, AOC and the rest of the progressive lawmakers in the House are able to use this leverage against.
So let's just rewind, because listen to her. Where'd she go? So you tell me if she's being sincere from her tone. Close your eyes and just listen to her voice.
Progressive lawmakers in the House are able to use this leverage against Pelosi to get her to agree to a.
Let me go back a little bit.
That argument. I didn't think that people in the labor movement, I didn't think that Bernie Sanders.
How am I going back so far? My bad, everybody. I have to go slower here.
So let's talk about a floor vote actually happening.
So listen to her voice here.
Right. Somehow, miraculously, AOC and the rest of the progressive lawmakers in the House are able to use this leverage against Pelosi to.
Why is that miraculously? When your own guest, David Sirota, just a few minutes ago explained how they have real leverage. But because you don't want to do the strategy of challenging your buddies that you're going to see at cocktail parties like AOC, you have to give it this description. What do you mean magically? What does that mean magically? Your guest, David Sirota, just told you how they have real leverage
to get her to agree to a floor vote in the House. And, you know, I think everyone agrees that it's unlikely to pass, the Senate. So the argument is, well, the floor vote is important, even if it's not going to pass in the Senate, because at least in the House, we'll know which Democrats are real about wanting to pass Medicare for all.
This is what she's doing here is recuperation. And let me explain to you when she's done.
all. But I mean, if I were a slimy, sketchy Democrat who wanted to pretend that I liked Medicare for all and would vote for it, if I know it's going to fail in the Senate, yeah, it's perfect cover. Like, I voted for.
And you see, and she gave a scenario to say, yeah, I wouldn't want that to happen, right? Now let's take it back, and then I'll interject here.
Progressive lawmakers in the House are able to use this leverage against Pelosi to get her to agree to a floor vote in the House. And, you know, I think everyone agrees that it's unlikely to pass, you know, the Senate. So the argument is, well, the floor vote is important, even if it's not going to pass in the Senate, because at least in the House, we'll know which Democrats are real about.
Now, I don't know if she really believes that's the only argument. And what I meant by recuperation, there's more to the strategy of force a vote that you get out of that, except for finding out who's for it or not. There's more to that strategy. What recuperation is, to strip most of all of the definition of what something is and just leaving something a shell, which in this case, that's what she's trying to do. Oh, it's just the strategy and just to see who's for it and who's not for it. That's it. Ro Khanna tried to weasel his way out in the interview with Sabby on this same thing. Oh, well, we don't really have to force a vote because, you know, you can just look at who co-sponsored the bill to see who's for it. No, that's bullshit. And she's trying to use recuperation here because there's a lot more meaning behind that. Because what about this? Forget if it identifies who is it or not. A bill is on the floor that it gives everybody health care that's being voted on. You don't think people would want to know what happened to that bill? You don't think there would be public interest in that, which provides an opening to push even more for the legislation? Even though it just, hey, the bill that would have given everybody medical coverage failed in the House today. That would inject so much fuel into the activism work. People who weren't even a part of the movement. What? There was a bill up for healthcare? And they voted it down? Oh, hell no. Let me join the movement. So there's a lot of things that comes from this force in this vote, other than what you're trying to just make it out to this. We can find out who it is, like Ro Khanna was trying to do that bullshit with Sabby in their interview. So no, but let's let her continue here.
Wanting to pass Medicare for all. But I mean, if I were a slimy, sketchy Democrat who wanted to pretend that I liked Medicare for all and would vote for it, if I know it's going to fail in the Senate, yeah, it's perfect cover. Like, I voted for Medicare for all, and it was the Senate that, you know, destroyed our opportunity here. I just feel like it.
That same strategy of voting for something you know is never going to get there, how come you don't apply that to the progressives you like? What if they're just voting for as a sham because they know it's never going to pass?
It's not going to play out the way that some of the fans of this strategy are hoping for, right? I just feel like this isn't actually going to reveal.
You see the other shade? Fans of the strategy. She's not serious at all. Fans, the workers. You know, the workers that like this strategy, those are fans.
I guess I agree with you, but I would also say I don't think I don't see a big downside.
He doesn't agree with her. You don't. You saw that? He just said, I guess I agree with you, but I would say I don't see a problem with it.
To it. I think that, you know, I think that, okay, let's imagine a vote happens. All the co-sponsors vote for it. It doesn't pass the House. It has fired up people, which is good. Getting people on record actually casting a vote for it, actually good. Even if some of those votes are fraudulent, you know, the idea being fraudulent, like if and when a Medicare for all vote comes up where we really think it has a chance to pass, it's part of a larger legislative strategy, some of those people, beg off and actually flip their votes. It's good to have them on record right now. All of that is good. I think the issue we're having is that to hold up
this is the part where he's stretching what happened to make Anna feels better. Because he basically said, I'm down for this strategy of forcing a vote that you just said you're against, Anna. But let me add this part in there too to make you feel better.
up this one tactic as a litmus test for whether you support the cause, whether you, activist groups, advocacy groups, whether this tactic alone is the holy grail.
No one said this tactic alone is the holy grail, but you're moving the goalpost to make Anna feel better.
Actually what we're talking about here, which is a nuanced point and an important point to unpack. I reject the idea that this one tactic is the silver bullet to solving healthcare in America.
No one ever said that. On its face, you just in your own argument said everybody acknowledges that this is not going to pass. So how can that even be true? How can both of those be true, David?
It has fired up people, which is good. Getting people on record.
Where's that at? Right there. I think it's there.
Activist groups, advocacy groups, whether this tactic alone is the holy grail. That's actually what we're talking about here, which is a nuanced point and an important point to unpack. I reject the idea that this one tactic is the silver bullet to solving healthcare in America.
No one is saying that. By your own admission and description of what they're trying to do with force to vote.
I agree that the tactic is important and helpful, but to hold it up as the
You see, he agrees with force to vote, but he has to make Anna feel good. Because Anna's not going to do it. So he's saying if she doesn't do it, if people don't do it and they do other things, that's okay too. You see?
Grail. And to further say this is the only tactic that matters and that all the other work that's going
no one's saying any of that
on, all the state efforts, all the effort to potentially get rid of a current chairperson who's in the power position to actually block this bill. Everything else is not important. The only thing that's important is this tactic. I think sets up the movement to fail. I think that's because we know the vote.
100% support it. We can't have a discussion about anything else. We need to do this and let's move on. Like that's not a good faith person.
Well,
I think there are big people who.
Okay, so let me fast forward to this part. This is the Jimmy Dore part you've seen on YouTube.
Without you saying, well, this means if you disagree with me, that you're actually working for the health insurance companies, you're actually working for big pharma, and you actually want to, torpedo this entire movement that you've been working on for 25 years. And it's not me, it's not everybody. It's an absurd, and I want to just say one other thing. It is also counterproductive in a bigger way.
I know, David, but like, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you now, but let me just say, I think the mistake that you're making, and let me also be clear on something. I think there are people engaged in this debate who agree with the tactic, who agree with the strategy. They are coming at this in an honest, sincere way. And I respect that, and I love that they're engaging in this discussion. And I think this debate is really important. Just right now, as we're doing the show, I'm gonna break my own ground rule. Jimmy Dore keeps accusing me of taking.
You see how the PMC class put their own personal goals, their own personal feelings ahead of what's good for the worker? We're talking about forcing a vote on Medicare for all, and what's about to derail that? We're talking about a strategy that you're telling us you're not for. A guy that you respect comes on and tells you how it's a great strategy and gives good points on it. All you have left is bad Jimmy Dore. You see how quickly the PMC class will sell the working class out because they don't like a personality. She had no good points against it.
Taking money from NATO. Like, he's insane. He's literally out of his mind, batshit crazy. Like, accusing people of things that you have no evidence of. I personally took $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg simply because I didn't immediately fall in line and say, like, this is fantastic. I don't even want to discuss it. 100% support it. We can't have a discussion about anything else. We need to do this and let's move on. Like, that's not a good faith person.
Well,
I think there are people who agree with him, right? And I'm interested in having a discussion with them, not interested in having a discussion with someone who has no evidence for anything and goes around, slinging mud and causing these ridiculous divisions within, a group of people who overwhelmingly agree with one another on these issues.
Right. And I think there's something bigger than just any one personality. I think it's that you have to be able to honestly.
So here we're gonna go a little bit more into I don't want to give it away. Okay, yeah, I'll just let it play.
Assess who is on your side and who isn't. And frankly, I don't think it's that hard to figure out who's on your side and who isn't.
It's time to assess who's on your side and who isn't. How do you make that determination who's on your side? Simply by what they believe? Oh, Medicare for all, you're on my side. Is a person on your side if they say Medicare for all in 40 years? Is that person on your side? They're for the same policy, but they say Medicare for all in 40 years. Is that person on your side? I guess that's debatable, but let's get back to the video.
In other words, it's pretty clear who the corporate Democrats are. It's pretty clear who the progressive supporters of Medicare for all are. By the way, a floor vote would help make that as clear as possible, I think, or at least more clear in the U.S. House of Representatives itself. But I think that, demonizing people that we all know are actually on the side of this fight, demonizing them because they may.
How do we know that they're all on the side of this fight? Based on what?
Disagree or have different views about what the best strategy is. That is deeply counterproductive. And let's use AOC as an example. Okay. If AOC does not, and the squad does not use their leverage to force a floor vote or try to force a floor vote, I'm not prepared to say that means that they don't believe in Medicare for all or that they're sellouts. I'm not prepared to.
Why aren't you prepared to believe that? If they're not taking an opportunity, one of the better opportunities, considering that the levels in the House was so close between Republicans and Democrats, one of the better opportunities, and there's a pandemic. So these two things are not going to come up very often.
The evidence is overwhelmingly against that they may disagree with the tactic.
The evidence is not overwhelmingly against that notion that they're selling out. There simply isn't, unless you're counting tweets and letters and interviews, everything but legislation.
And I may disagree with them for their position on the tactic on not forcing a Medicare for all vote, but I'm not willing to say, nor do I believe that means that they don't want to pass Medicare for all or aren't willing to fight as hard as possible for Medicare for all.
What does that mean, fight as hard as possible? What does that mean? Because therein lies, I think, the difference in them and us, reformists and revolutionists.
It could just be that they have a different theory of change. And when you take a strategic difference and try to broaden it to be a difference of values, if you don't have evidence that is rational and logical to do that, what you're doing is you're undermining people who are really on your side and who are trying to do the right thing. I mean, if you tell me, I'll say this: if you tell me, look, AOC and the squad are not going to force a vote, and I just found out that their super PAC got a huge, $500,000 from Aetna, then you can say, hey, listen, this looks like they sold out.
That's the only way. It has to be a smoking gun like that in order for us to understand whether they're selling out or not. That's his threshold. What about perpetually not doing things that's left? What about perpetually disappointing your constituency?
But if you tell me they're not going to use their leverage to force a floor vote on Medicare for all, because they actually have an idea to, for instance, use their leverage to change, I don't know, House pay-go rules, right? The budget rules that make it impossible to actually pass.
To change House pay-go rules, as if that matters when Speaker Pelosi's the Speaker of the House. You see, let's do these technical sort of tactics that get us nowhere very fast. And you got to keep re-electing. So just think about that. You see the game, the long-term game they're playing, making this a career. You're telling me in the 4 years of your term, you're not going to complete those things. You need another term. What are you completing in your term? Let's listen a little more before we rebut this here.
Medicare for all in a real way. If you tell me that means that they're selling out to the insurance companies and you don't have evidence, there's no proof, there's no rational, documented proof that they're acting in a nefarious way, then asserting that they're acting in a corrupt, nefarious way is both not really credible.
Do votes count? What about if they vote for NATO to increase NATO and then they vote to increase the police budget? What about that? Does that count? And the Iron Dome?
And also deeply destructive to the larger movement. And again, this is a movement that has been going on for a very long time. Now, I know there are critics out there who say, well, look, anybody who's been working on this for a long time, it means that you don't know what you're doing because we haven't passed Medicare.
Oh, it's fun. I didn't know that sort of argument, but that's interesting. But I guess that's a case-by-case scenario. You can't really use that blanketly because there could be some people who's in the fight for Medicare for all that's been in there for decades that have been put there to make sure it takes a long time. Then it could be the people that's in there that's been in there for decades because it's been that hard to fight. So it's not a blatant statement, but there are some I would say is in both camps.
Care for all by now. So all the work you've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, actually it proves that you're pathetic and a failure because you haven't passed Medicare for all yet. Well, that writes out the history of how powerful the interests really are. That writes out the history of every social movement that takes decades to achieve its goals. And so my point is moving forward is to try to understand who our enemies are, who they are, who our allies are, and understand that among allies there are going to be disagreements.
If, let's say, I live where Jalen Walker lives, where he was shot 64 times, I believe. And the vote AOC or the squad or progressives made to increase police funding, increase the funding in that city where he was shot. Is she considered an enemy? for voting to fund the police in these states, in these cities that are murdering people? Can that make her an enemy of the Black community, the indigenous community? Like this arbitrary like threshold, oh, it has to be this clear, making donations from, or somebody taking donations from corporate healthcare lives. So many different ways to be co-opted to sell out than just that.
Agreements, and they're going to be vehement disagreements. But
like coordinating votes where you vote absent or present.
Personalizing them and using them to assert corruption, using them to assert a lack of moral principle when you're having a tactical dispute, that is deeply destructive to the entire movement for the actual issue and the actual outcome.
Yeah, and the other thing that's the other thing that's kind of been on my mind about this whole debate is the sort of over focus on just internal parliamentary maneuvers. I mean, you mentioned the passage of Medicare in the 1960s, and when any big broad policy like this has been passed in the past, a bunch of like what we would call quote unquote corporate sellouts voted for them. You know what I mean? And it was just because they were forced to by a sort of shift in the balance of power from forces outside of the halls of Congress. I mean, you know, Lyndon Johnson has a very mixed record as a senator in the sort of things he believed and the things he supported and the things he crushed often when he was a senator. And then he oversaw the passage of Medicare. So the purity of Lyndon Johnson was never really an important debate to be having. I mean, everyone knows that he was kind of a power hungry person who was willing to do anything for power and were willing to compromise on anything for that. So, but it was the shift in conditions that came after decades of organizing a powerful labor movement, a civil rights movement, things like that were able to shift the political terrain outside of the halls of Congress, so that a bunch of these, what we would call corporate sellouts, ended up actually voting for it. So it just strikes me as like an overfocus on this as some sort of tactic that's going to essentially be kind of like a Game Genie cheat code in the Nintendo game, you know, and skip 3 or 4 levels. And
but there is no cheat code. There's no up.
There
up,
is no
down,
cheat
down,
code.
X,
Yeah.
Y, X. No, that doesn't work in politics like that. And I agree with you. But I would also say that's why
you see the sort of condescending attitude, like as if this is gonna get us get us much, like this is not gonna produce much, as if what they're doing has produced anything. What has your strategy produced? Just as Democrats voted in, doing what? Being spineless and tweeting? It's absurd. So let me play this last clip. Or is this the last clip? This might be second to last clip. I did that one, this one. Yeah, this might be second to last clip. This one here, where it kind of shows, I have written here, David and Jimmy debates Kevin McCarthy, shows how unserious David is. So that's what I have written down in my notes. So let's see. I don't vividly recall until this pops up. Let's see what this one is here. See the title, and it'll tell me. Okay, debunk distraction tactics against for. Okay, so now I sort of remember this. I think this is Jim. Yeah, this is the video of a video, if I remember, where he's examining a video of a video. So yeah, so we're gonna examine this one here, but just to kind of catch you up in the conversation, we're talking about the strategy divide, and that divide kind of comes down to this fault line of class divide, where you have the upper class of the left, the PMC class, the upper class of PMCs in training on the left, and then the workers. And how far the PMC class of the left is willing to go is never far enough to get the things that the working class part of the left needs. And therein lies a dilemma, why I believe that there's this split, there's this realigning of the left. Because they're saying, hey, this tactic is just not adequate for the moment. You're doing these technical things, maneuvering, get somebody, it's just not adequate for the moment. Oh, and this is so there was some back and forth about David Sirota's support for the first to vote. And this was, I think, Jimmy trying to clear it up or understanding about it. So let's listen to a little bit of this.
David Sirota. So he wrote this article saying that getting a floor vote for Medicare for all is good, but we should try to do even more things. And then when he came on the show, we thought he was saying one thing, which was that you can't risk losing the speakership to Kevin McCarthy. You can't risk doing that. And I said, well, then you're going to lose your negotiation with Nancy Pelosi. And then I tweeted it out that he said he wasn't willing to do that. And he said, no, I am willing to do that. So he came back on the show. And so now I'm going to show you all that because I've had a chance to review the videotape, and it's kind of interesting. So let's just start it here. A lot of people hate Jimmy Dore more than they hate medical bankruptcy. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird, but that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Reich says, if you think COVID treatment should be free, of course it should. Why do you think insulin shouldn't be, or cancer treatment, or mental health? Healthcare should not be run for profit, period. David Sirota wrote the article saying all these other things we should do besides just this floor vote, even though we can't get that. He wants to do more things, which I'm for.
Yes.
But it's like we got to. I'm hoping we can concentrate on the bare minimum. That was my position. So he had written this. He says, for instance, in this article he wrote, it says, for instance, it's easier to do YouTube rants and get retweets about high-profile floor votes than it is to get everyone excited about the much harder organizing work of getting esoteric HSS wafers and removing a relatively obscure committee chairman.
No, let me just interject here on my own point. This goes back to what I was just saying about all the technical stuff. You see how they're saying it's okay. It's saying, hey, it's easy to just go on and rant. It's easy to just come on here and be the voice of the working class and shout the anger that you're hearing in the working class. You're echoing. That's what we're doing as podcasters here. It's easy to do that, except for the organizing to get all of these to get this HSS waivers and recovering a relatively chairman, because none of this is what we're saying needs to be done to get what needs to be done. You see how he's going back. The point I'm trying to make, you see how he's going back to what I said earlier? Getting these technical tactics. We're not interested in these technical tactics that's slow moving. Again, they're social democrats. They're not democratic socialists. They're social democrats. They want to facilitate marginal change through the existing apparatus.
Who was blocking progress. So what that's called is throwing shade. That's what that's called. Or rather posted. He didn't throw it. He posted that shade at his blog site way harder than a YouTube rant, I guess. So I busted his balls when he came on the show about that.
Did.
I go, that's so easy to do. Go ahead and do it. And of course, we both chuckled because he can't do that. But
yeah, they're talking about his YouTube channel because David Sirota's YouTube channel is terrible. So you're trying. He's basically saying anybody can do that, and he's like, no, anybody can't do that. You can't do it, David.
Yeah, that's way harder to do. So that's why we got to do the thing we can do. And if you want to work on that, go ahead. But we already have momentum for this thing, right? To get a vote. And that was my point. And so when I came out, he kept saying, well, we could do even more. We could do even more. And I'm like, so you're telling me I'm small balling this, but they're not even going to fucking do that. That was my position. Right. And so he was saying stuff like this. He would say a reminder that the incoming Democratic president could, with the stroke of a pen, expand Medicare to cover millions of people, and nobody is doing any pressure or organizing around this at all, because the left wants performance art rather than the results. So again, that's another dig for no reason. Like, this is a great idea. He even now says he endorsed. He said he endorsed it, but he couldn't stop throwing shade at it. He couldn't stop shitting on it and trying to take the enthusiasm out from underneath it. That's how it looks, and that's what that is. And so we brought him on the show, and there's a big controversy. I don't know if you saw the show, but we heard him saying that he was not willing to sacrifice Nancy Pelosi losing her speakership. He was not going to play that game. Because
this point here is a point we must clear up, because this is the adversarial line. And being adversarial, that's what Force the Vote was about. It's, hey, be adversarial, and they're saying no to being adversarial. So that's the strategy divide that we're the larger concepts we're talking about, the larger concepts above just Force the Vote. Force the Vote is just the framing we use to talk about these larger concepts.
Because Nancy Pelosi would let Kevin McCarthy become speaker. Here, he says it here. Here we go.
Nancy Pelosi, I think ultimately at the end of the day, if you really demanded that she actually do something on Medicare for all, it was a choice between letting Kevin McCarthy be.
I got to find this original video here where he comes on with this outfit. I have not been able to find the episode link. I got to find that because I'm curious to watch this entire thing here.
Become Speaker of the House, which would be a very bad thing, or doing something real on Medicare for all. I don't have a confidence that she would care to do the right thing. And so when you're negotiating with people.
You're hearing what he's saying? I'm going to rewind it if some of you didn't catch it. You'll see Jimmy smile because he caught it too.
Very bad thing, or doing something real on Medicare for all. I don't have a confidence that she would care to do the right thing. And so when you're negotiating with people like that, that's the Trump card, no pun intended, that they're willing to do actual, true, serious damage to human beings. And that's a real problem when you're trying to negotiate with people like that.
This is what makes your strategy flawed. What you just pointed out, David, the strategy of using the Democrats, get cozy and up to them, you're pointing out you're not sure Nancy Pelosi, even with the threat of Force the Vote, she'd be like, fuck them. She wouldn't care. But the same people you're saying wouldn't care is the same people you're saying we're trying to convince to give us committee seats, committee assignments, chairmanships. You see the ridiculousness of this?
So he's setting the table that Nancy Pelosi is willing to go nuclear, let Kevin McCarthy become speaker. Now, there's a big problem with that. I'm going to tell you what it is in a second. That couldn't happen. That's the problem. But let's finish this. Hear you saying, David, is you're giving an out for them to not do this, and that's
no. I'm not giving them an out.
Yeah,
I'm saying I don't know the answer to when push really came to shove. If you said, I want these things that you really don't want to do, and that those lawmakers should then vote in the way that we're talking about to elect Kevin McCarthy speaker. That's
up to Nancy Pelosi, and you keep.
Maybe we don't. Maybe it's sort of a moot point. I don't know. But I'm saying, like, when I think through that, just as a human being.
As a human
I
being,
don't
you're
know what the right
misframing
call
this.
is at the
You
end of the
keep,
day.
as a human being, you keep misframing the issue. You're misframing it as, are you really going to hand it over to? No, that's Nancy Pelosi's call. That's how you play. That's called negotiating.
I think
And what
that's a
you're
fair
no,
point.
what you're at. No, let me finish. What you're asking to do is negotiate from a position of weakness, and you have that energy of defeat already.
Right. If you're not willing to take it to where you say, I'm forcing the vote, and if it ends up somebody else can be the speaker, then so be it. If you don't have that, what leverage do you have? This is how you're never going to get nothing in the Democratic Party. If you're not willing to take it there, you're never going to get anything. You're always going to be in this position of begging and on the outside, being the Cinderella before the prince, and they were treating her bad.
So that is a mistake.
I don't think I do. I'm
Okay.
only admitting that we're dealing with people who don't care about the consequences.
You're saying we
of their
can't fight.
actions.
You're saying we
and
can't
it's a
do
troubling situation.
So it sounded to us like you can't, and that's what it sounded like to us. So and by the way, what he's saying is this is not a fear. Kevin McCarthy can't become speaker. The Democrats have the majority. And how do I know this? Because,
and again, do you think David doesn't know this? And it goes back to the other video where he interjected the example about, oh, we ended up with a Democratic legislator and a Republican. Why are you saying that? Are you intentionally just throwing out information to you, trying to misinform some people that may not understand what's happening? Because you should know this if you don't. And Jimmy Dore has Ryan Grimm, one of their people, one of the PMCs, explain what actually happens.
Because Ryan Grimm was on right before David Sirota came on and told me.
So she has to go to the House floor and she has to get 218 votes.
Right.
And Republicans aren't going to vote for her. And so if she can't get 218 Democrats, then there's no speaker.
Right.
And then it kicks back to the caucus, and then it's chaos, and then a whole bunch of people can run, and then somebody will emerge. Somebody would emerge from that process, who would then also need to unify the party and say we need 218 votes to get to the House floor. So she won it in the caucus, but she has to get through the process because.
So David Sirota's concern in the previous video was that if we withhold our vote for Nancy Pelosi, that Kevin McCarthy become speaker. That was his big contention. And so he was like, I don't know if we could do that. That's a hard choice. Nancy Pelosi's willing to play hardball. And then he seemed to be indicating that he wasn't. That's what it seems like to me from that video. But he's wrong anyway, because as he points out, you don't get Kevin McCarthy as speaker.
You don't. And I'm going to stop there and end with my going back to the Chris Hedges video. This is where we're going to end on. There's a certain segment I do want to bring up.
And
let me see. I think it's 41-46 here. But back to the topic. The realignment of the left and the strategy divide. I believe because of the strategy divide, and the strategies divide is because we're really talking about getting two different things. Yes, we're really talking about changing the apparatus, one group, and another group saying, I want to work within the same apparatus, the same rusted apparatus. So that strategically, that can't happen. That sort of coalition building can't happen. Let me push it here. 41-46. And let's listen to Chris and Kashama. Oops.
We're going to have to remain fast. And let me also add, the problem with running as a Democrat is that the working class is...
Oh, I don't know how I got this wrong. Hang on a second here. Let's go back a little more. Right there.
Impediments to third parties is precisely because of the two-party corporate duopoly, which has conspired essentially to prevent any kind of effective electoral challenge. So yes, it's going to be extremely difficult. They're going to throw every impediment they can in terms of third parties, but we're going to have to remain fast. And let me also add, the problem with running as a Democrat is that the working class is fully aware that the greatest betrayal that they have endured has come from the Democratic Party, and in particular, the Clinton administration. So in my book, America, the Farewell Tour, I wrote a chapter out of Anderson, Indiana, which used to be a huge center for GM plants. Well, after NAFTA, GM literally ripped down they moved all the machinery to Monterrey, Mexico, and then ripped down the plants and left giant weed-choked lots surrounded by cyclone fencing. And then, of course, Anderson fell into the kind of tailspin that many former industrial centers have fallen into. And I talked to the old UAW leadership, and they said they were never going to vote for Clinton. They're not unaware of who did this to them. So they actually voted for Bernie. But once Clinton got the nomination, they all voted for Trump. So workers, especially unionized workers, are well aware of the lies that were told to them that were far more destructive to their families, their livelihood, their communities than any lie ever told by Donald Trump. And that's the problem, that if you are going to attempt to reach out to the working class, at this point, you can't do it through the institutions of the Democratic Party, which has made war on workers now for several decades. It's got, and yes, it's going to be extremely difficult. And yes, they're going to find every mechanism that they can to throwing up walls and barriers to our advancement, which is why strikes are really important. But unfortunately, that's the only route left. And it is going to be a struggle. It's not going to be easy. They're not going to make it easy. It's never going to be easy, because essentially we're talking about the wresting back of power from these corporate elites into the hand.
And that is what this description is what needs to be done. We're not going to wrestle power away from corruption through their corrupt system, through the apparatus. The apparatus has to be changed. And he's describing this is not an easy thing. And this is part of why the PMC class don't want to do it. Why they push electoral politics, because it's white collar. Because it doesn't require, do anything like striking, like real hard work.
The hands of the citizenry.
I think everyone's really comfortable with the idea that it's not going to be easy. I think everyone's really, I don't think anyone has a particularly rosy outlook on this. But what does it look like? Let's just completely ignore the idea of running within the Democratic Party. Let's table that entirely. What does a third party candidacy look like that doesn't just repeat the kind of marginal effect that a Green Party run looks like? Should people be paying attention to, efforts like MPP or the Forward Party? Should the left just sit out 2024 and sit out 2022 because there isn't the level of labor militancy that is required?
We should definitely not be sitting out, and I don't think that should be the message at all from this conversation. I think that we have to have. Obviously, we need organizations that will do this. So when you say, well, you're saying organizing, but what does that mean? Well, we need organizations, and I understand, and understand where you're coming from. But we have to point out that part of the problem is also those labor leaders who tell you, can you edit that out because I don't want to present a challenge. Well, there you go. You just said that, how, well, nobody's accepting that it's going to be easy. Well, there are some leaders who don't want to make it difficult for themselves, because their own lives will be difficult if they really pose a challenge in the way that they need to. So they are not going to be doing this. So in other words,
all right, I'm going to be straightforward with you.
Right. So she's basically getting to the point that a lot of current labor leaders might be bought off or part of the Democratic establishment already. So she addresses that here.
Important to acknowledge that we are not going to be able to do this, as you're saying, give me a sort of blueprint, tell me how to do it, what are the ABCs, how do that whole thing remains unstarted unless we have organizations that are willing to understand that that is what it takes. It takes you to be a real force that that just really antagonizes the ruling class, understands who you are, because that is what it will take to win over
Antagonizing the ruling class.
These working people, many of whom will actually end up being more and more attracted to right populism. And in fact, there's a real danger in the midterm elections. It's really not clear at all how the Democrats are going to avoid a real, a serious debacle unless they actually get their act together, which I don't expect. I don't have a perspective that they will, but that's the point. I mean, that's how much room there is for right populism. So we have to, in terms of, how do we get this started? We will need organizations to take the kind of approach that, unfortunately, Socialist Alternative is the only organization that has taken, which is that you understand that being independent means actually being in the face of the Democratic Party
adversarial.
every single day.
This is the strategy that's going to work, and it's completely the opposite of what reformists think is going to work. She's saying adversarial in their face every single day. And what are reformists saying? Oh, we don't want to be adversarial there. Have you ever heard of strategy? How many times you've heard that? We're picking and choosing where we're being. When have you been adversarial? They're saying cozy up, be nice, so you can get a committee seat. We're saying no to that strategy. That's a reformist strategy. We're with Kashama and Chris on this one.
This organization will be attacked. We will come under major assault, but we will power through that because we don't expect that anything can change just through one election cycle. And that doesn't mean we not fight to win. I mean, I think we are, Socialist Alternative and I are in a good position to say honestly that we fight to win because we have won every election to city council and we just defeated the recall. But the point is, the reason we have won, ironically, is precisely because we don't think about it as how do we win in this election cycle. Every election campaign.
You see, that's something that the PMC class just can't. That framing, they can't. It's 4 years. We got it. No. If we start a party today, in 4 years, that party's not going to be there. You have to stop thinking in electoral framing. We're trying to build a system to replace what's here.
Campaign has been, how do we actually build the struggle right now? Those are the kind of organizations we need. And I'm sorry, I don't have a simple answer for you, Brianna, in the sense that, I can't say that, Socialist Alternative will do this. We want to be part of forming a new political organization for the working class, but we cannot do it alone. So we do need other, organizations, labor unions to do this. But if the labor leaders are not willing to do this, then we need the rank and file to take on the mantle. And that is
rank and file, if not the labor leaders. I just happened to catch this. Yeah, I have I think we have ad blocker and Rome's got an account. I just haven't done it. Like I don't care enough that the commercial pops up for 10 seconds. I don't care enough to have done the the minuscule work that is required to add the ad blocker or log into Rome's account. I don't care enough about the commercial. So sorry, everybody. If I care more, maybe I'll get it done one of these days. Well, let's go.
Is where our conversation about strike actions comes up, because we need rank and file union members to really experience their own power, to experience, to understand how they actually get organized and win victories, because the question of a political party comes out of that struggle. So there's no
right. It's not the other way around. It's the movement. See, this is why it's so hard to strategize, because they're thinking electorally every 2 to 4 years. We got a candidate and this and prepare. We got to get. That's not It's when you're, oh, I am feeding the unhoused. There's no time limit on that. Oh, there's an election come up. Anybody want to run out of our movement that's helping to organize? Sure, let's put somebody up on there. That's the way. So there's no, the elections coming up doesn't stop the process of organizing.
Unfortunately, there is no simple answer to what you're saying, but it's also not impossible, and it does need to be done. But the starting point, as I said, is to reject the Democratic Party and to also understand that the leaders who are not willing to take on the Democratic Party and the ruling class, they are active obstacles to this.
Yes, the people who are not willing. So this is where we're getting into, I think this divide has to happen. This realignment has to happen.
Project of a new party.
And you also have seen, like with the teachers' strikes in, was it West Virginia and Oklahoma, they defied the union leadership. They struck in defiance of the leadership.
Absolutely. That's a very crucial example.
What would you say to a Nina Turner character or a Nina Turner type or a Marianne Williamson type running as a third party in 2024, including potentially on like the forward party line?
You see, it's a. Now, this is not for Bree because she's doing that because this is the topic. But what I find is, you see all of what Kashama says. If you talk about all these other strategy, a lot in the PMC class, it's almost like they don't even hear that shit. It has to be brought back to the framing of every 2 to 4 years. It has to be. That is the only way they understand anything. And this pulling us back is the problem.
That is not about this election cycle. This is the problem with Bernie. I mean, how much money did Bernie raise? It was quite a bit. And where did it all go? Nowhere.
Yeah, he said it. This is not about this election cycle. This is what the PMC class just simply cannot get out of their understanding of strategy. Oh, there's 2 commercials. These people. That really happens, but let's go. All right.
We're not going to impose significant change within an election cycle. This is a long fight. I go back to Sirota. It was a 10-year battle before they achieved power.
Well, you both supported Bernie Sanders, so would you support a candidacy like that?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that I supported Bernie. I did vote for him in the primary, in the Democratic primary, but I've voted Green Party since 2000. I've never voted for a Democrat. And yes, of course, I mean, voting in the primary for Bernie was the obvious choice, but I had never had any illusions about Bernie Sanders.
Well, in this hypothetical I'm presenting, that these candidates wouldn't be running as a Democrat. They would be running as a Green Party candidate or as a Forward Party candidate.
I can't speak for them, but I mean, and I know Nina not well, but have done a few events with her. I mean, I think, and look what happened in Nina's campaign. She fully understands what defiance of the Democratic Party establishment, even within the party, entails, because she was really defeated by an organized effort by the Democratic Party hierarchy. So, yeah, I mean, we have to understand that this hierarchy is deeply hostile to any kind of real change.
Mm-hmm.
It's why they selected Biden. Biden's candidacy was a wash. And then they reached out frantically and got Michael Bloomberg. And then that didn't work. And then Obama and the machine essentially got everyone to drop out so that it had to be Biden. But, Biden never had any real support without this kind of corporate money and the power of Pelosi and Schumer, that they're the funnel for this money to the anointed candidates. And they hold it like a big stick over figures like AOC. And they use it. And Bernie knows it. Bernie knows that if he were to defy the Democratic Party leadership, he would no longer be in the Senate, in the same way that George McGovern was turned on by the Democratic Party leadership in '72. And then when he went on to hold hearings on the animal ag industry.
That might flake out at the end. I accept that a candidate who is part of the system might be more likely to flake out. And so I'm presenting this is what we've got right now. Well, Shama says we shouldn't sit this one out, that we shouldn't disengage from the electoral cycle. Okay, well then what should we do? I hear your cautious warnings about all of the things we could trip over, but this is the moment where I feel like the left should be strategizing about what the best possible options are, because we are going to be presented, likely, according at least to this reporting 2 years out, that someone's going to make a run for it. And I would like the left to be able to choose someone that is the best person to make the run, that our goals are clear, even if it's that the person isn't going to win, that they are going to be able to mobilize folks and shift them into an organization, the likes of which both of you are describing, and which I agree is important. But it feels like we're a little bit caught in a circle of saying, yes, I agree that this might not all work, but so therefore we shouldn't make any kind of effort. No, we shouldn't sit it out. So, what are we saying? What do we do with the fact that part of this, to Shama's point, is electoral?
Well, I agree with Shama. I don't sit out elections. But I think we have to look at the election process as the way Shama does, as part of a long process, and a process that has goals outside of simply voting.
So what does that mean for 2022 and 2024 affirmatively? What does that mean?
I'm going to stop it here, because this is she's making the point that I'm making. She needs a tangible, just tell me this to do in 22. They keep telling her this is not about this. This is what we have to get out of this understanding, this locked into this 4 years is coming up, and you vote for somebody, then what? You think that us being in this cycle is what got us thinking that nothing is gonna be delivered by who we elect in 2022 or 2024. Nothing is gonna be delivered to the working class, but because of those votes or those elections. Break out of this, and it's a raising a level of consciousness in the electorate and in the community. So I'm gonna stop it here, because I'm supposed to have stopped about 20 minutes ago. So I'm gonna stop it here, and take you out, of course, with an historical video. I've played it before, but it's so good I'm gonna play it again. But I am going to sum up the topic here. And that is, because of the strategy divide, which is a class divide, we are going to be seeing, if not, we are already seeing a realigning of the left. There's simply things that people that are part of the left that strategically have opposite goals. One wants to use the apparatus. The social democrats, they're not democratic socialists, because they're not advocating to get rid of capitalism. They're social democrats who want to use the existing system to create the best changes they can get. That's who they are. I'm sorry. This is part of the realignment. So it's the strategy of getting rid of the apparatus and a new apparatus, or using the apparatus, that's causing this divide. And on that side this is a class divide. You have the working poor, then you have more of the PMC class or aspiring PMCs. But you're seeing this diverging, this happen, and I'm not sure it can be put back together. I'm not sure that can happen. I just don't see it right now. I don't see that possibility. So that is the realignment of the left and the strategy divide. It's a lot of words we've used for all of this, but this is essentially what it is. It's a class divide here within the left. And maybe it's happening, or it's happening because they're not in the class. And the working class needs to re-engage all of the working class. That's what the working class needs to do. Disengage from the capitalist class that they've been teamed up with through the Democratic Party and re-engage with the working class. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Let's see here. I will try to toss up some of these comments as fast as I can. This is Martin Luther King. I may let this loop twice. It's about a minute and a half. I may let it loop twice before we end the stream, but we'll not be coming back after the stream. Make sure you like this video. Let's see where we're at, actually. I need to do this before we go. Like check here. Let's do a like check. So 368. Great. Could we push that to 380? That's 12 more. Let's see if we get 12 more likes. Push that to 380. And also, so you're liking this video right now, and then subscribe to our Substack, so you get notifications for when we do live streams like this, or the ones we did yesterday, the RBN live stream. You'll get those notifications if you join our Substack. I think we already have. Oh yeah, and our Patreon. Yeah, it's already scrolling at the bottom. Our Patreon, if you want to support us on a monthly basis, we have many different plans on our Patreon. That is our best way to support us financially. Is patreon.com/revolutionary blackout. Like the stream. We're going to end with this historical video with Martin Luther King, and then the stream will end. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Not sure I'll be here tomorrow, but tomorrow is the Sabby and JB show. So that is tomorrow. We'll see if I'll have something prepared for tomorrow or not. But as of right now, I would say no, but things always change. So here is MLK.
I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. In the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. It has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
America, take a good look at your beloved candidates. They're nothing but hideous space reptiles. It's true. We are aliens. But what are you going to do about it? It's a two-party system. You have to vote for one of us.
He's right. This is a two-party system. Well, I believe I'll vote for a third-party candidate.
Go ahead. Throw your